Our next panel to come to the stage. Our next panel is going to be talking about the challenges for enterprise adoption and some of the technical hurdles. It's going to be chaired by Amy Peck. Thank you.
Welcome to our VRX panel. I want to thank our sponsors. It's the UK Department for International Trade here in San Francisco. My name is Amy Peck. I am the founder of EndeavorVR. We are an AR/VR consulting and advisory firm working primarily with enterprise clients looking to leverage this technology for both internal processes and productivity. We also work with developers building pretty incredible solutions in the space and really bridging that gap between the two. We have a pretty incredible panel today, and I'm going to hand it over to let you introduce yourselves.
So I'm Matthew Brooks. I'm from BBC R&D. As you may know, the BBC have dipped their toe in the water in terms of VR audience experiences for a while now, and within R&D, we're also looking at what that might mean for us in the production space.
Great.
I'm Kumar Chinnaswamy. I manage commercial VR solutions at Intel. My job is actually a fun job. I'm fortunate enough to focus on trying to build a commercial VR market space. So more of our goal is to work with partners in the different new areas of education, healthcare, retail, and look at how do we grow this marketplace over the next 2 to 3 years.
Hi, I'm Mark Roberts. I'm Design Operations Manager for McLaren Automotive. So our mission is to be the iconic car company. We make really cool supercars. A big part of my job more recently is to introduce VR technology, AR technology, and give us a whole bunch of new tools where the designers can start to work in that VR world in the most natural, believable, confident way to improve the way we design our cars.
Great. So I think we should just start really head on with what the topic of the panel is, which is overcoming some of the technical challenges for mass adoption of VR relative to enterprise. And so what does that look like at each of your companies, both from an internal buy-in standpoint, looking at whether you're looking for improving internal processes or looking externally at your customer or B2B consumer base?
Well, I guess the interesting thing from the BBC perspective is, in a way, AR's been there for a while, right? We've got virtual elements to a lot of our news studios, to a lot of our weather studios. So part of the business is kind of sold on that. It's business as usual. I know this isn't kind of, it's not using those technologies specifically for production, but every news broadcast you see that comes from the BBC has virtual elements. Our cameramen are looking down at cameras that know where they are in the room. There's a bunch of markers on the ceiling so we can track them, and that's how we fold all that content in. So I think the AR side of things on that front for us is kind of, it's already sold. But it's not necessarily the form we have it in front of us today. We don't have people in studios who are able to visualize that through maybe an AR device, and that might be something that could be interesting in the future, I guess.
Well, I think I can answer that in 2 parts. One is around what it takes to go scale enterprise solutions for VR. And another is the technical aspect of what is it, what do we need to do technically, what are the advancements technically to go scale enterprise VR. If you take the first part, one of the interesting things which I see when I talk to folks around here and outside of the industry is that a lot of the folks are coming from the gaming industry, transitioning into commercial VR, but selling into enterprise is a very tough process, right? It's a 9-month to 18-month sales cycle if you don't know the right folks in the enterprise. So that's one big challenge in scaling things up. Second thing is establishing clear value proposition for the decision maker in the company, the IT decision maker or the line of business managers. It doesn't matter which vertical you are in. You got to show the value proposition of what you're doing with the technology very clearly. And if you can't do that, you can't sell it in. And the third thing is again, we need the install base and the scale. And what I was telling the rest of the folks on this panel out here was that if I take the whole sum of commercial VR solutions available today and apply it to Intel is give or take 100,000 people, about 1,000 people will use it at Intel, right? That's about 1% of the population will actually use the technology, even if I take the leading edge technology available today. So there is a big gap in going from where we are today to how do we scale the solution, and that has challenges within the enterprise. That's all, everything from the market forces standpoint. But then you go take a look at what is the technology aspect of it, and one which is oft mentioned today is the tether for the wireless, for the head-mounted display. We are working on integrating Intel's wireless gigabit technology, WiGig technology to remove the tether. We are looking at coming up with lower cost HMDs. Cost is another big concern. And then you will see us democratizing the technology fairly broadly to actually help drive, kind of remove the barrier of adoption, so to speak.
I suppose for me, I've got two groups of people to totally convince. The first, closest to my heart, is the design studio. I've got to convince the designers that who already have a tried and tested process, they're very comfortable with the way they design cars. And I'm coming along saying, hey guys, why don't you try this? And it doesn't sit comfortably with them to start with. We're starting to make really good progress now with that though, and we've always used physical models. We actually use clay, so we make full-size CNC machined clay models. The guys are always going to be really confident with that because they can touch and feel and get a real confidence in what they've created. And now I'm trying to convince them to say, why don't you put this headset on and we can have a wander around this virtual car? And at first, they were really, really uncomfortable with the idea of it. And it was like, hey, this is cool, I like this, but you know what? Let's take it off now and go do some work. But they're starting now to put the headset on to do work. And that, for me, is, first, it's a relief, and second, it's a real breakthrough that we are really progressing with it now, and we're starting to create some new tools. And now the guys are starting to suggest to me, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? And that's my challenge then to deliver it. The second, perhaps the bigger challenge, is to convince the business. Why would they invest money in something when we've already got a process that works and we're already delivering, great cars? So that's something that I'm working very hard to do now, and it's more than anything, it's being a salesman for the technology internally, and it's been quite a tough challenge. But again, by convincing, starting with the marketing team, saying to them, instead of keep going out to all the agencies and spending the money that you're spending, why don't you give me a little bit of that money? I can start to employ people. I can give you your assets, but then actually, selfishly, I can start to produce some of those tools myself in-house. So it's kind of, it's getting the balance right and finding ways of spending the money without upsetting too many of the managers.
Yeah, so we actually talked a little bit about that earlier, and maybe if you two can talk a little bit about internally the benefits of sort of coalescing sort of a singular department responsible for the AR initiatives within the company, because I've found with some of my clients there might be 7 or 8 factions working on different VR solutions, and none of them speak to each other. So if you can all talk a little bit about that.
I think we've all suffered. Sorry, I was going to say. I think we've all suffered from that, from the brief conversation we've had before. Yeah, it makes absolute perfect sense for us. I think all of us to create a central team of some form that can start to deliver to all of our customers. Customers being internal as well as external.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've got about, I think there's over 20,000 people in the BBC at the moment, and we've commissioned VR content and 360 content from different parts of the business without necessarily getting it right in terms of sharing that learning and sharing maybe a technical approach as well. So we're spinning up a new function to do that over the next 18 months that's going to kind of consolidate the commissioning, share some of the kind of editorial learnings back. There's new grammars to making this stuff that we're still kind of discovering. And kind of making sure as well that everything hits that BBC quality bar, because there's an expectation, there's quite a high expectation from the audience that something that we put out there is going to be decent. And I suppose it's quite a new thing for us as well to step into a realm where, if we deliver video to you, it's going to work at 24 frames a second or whatever frame rate it is. You're not going to experience any problems with it. However, if we're delivering real-time rendered VR content or 360 content and we don't know what device you've got, there's a possibility there that your device won't hit the required frame rate. And again, we're going to make people potentially ill. My background is in video games, so I did about 15 years there, and you won't get a video game out on any platform if there's something wrong with it. But obviously, this kind of chain, almost like technical requirements checklist from my past life as a video game developer, doesn't really exist in the BBC. There's quality in terms of the video encoding, but things can't really go wrong, and everyone's device can play it back. So that's another thing we have to look at, really. If we're making this content, how can we make sure that it works on everybody's device out there? And it's a completely new part of the BBC.
And Kumar, you mentioned a few things relative to this.
Well, if you take a large company like Intel, one of the things we notice and we kind of acknowledge is that innovation doesn't happen on a schedule. Innovation happens asynchronously across different parts of the organization. So you cannot prevent that type of situation from happening. And in fact, you got to encourage it, right? So you have to let that process happen where innovation in AR and VR happens across all places at Intel. You will see folks doing it in the fab and the manufacturing space, which is completely isolated than what we do from the product side. But that's actually a good thing if you actually embrace that philosophy. And the idea is that, and we heard this in the conversation yesterday, is from some of the keynote speakers, VR is not making money today, right? VR is not going to make money potentially in all of 2017, right? It's going to take another 2 to 3 years before the industry. There is an install base of HMDs, and then there is a cohesiveness of all of the software stacks, right? There is an initiative which Intel is driving to go make that happen. Once that happens is when it's going to manifest itself into profit and scale, okay? That's the time in which we look at from an internal standpoint and say, okay, now let's coalesce it into a single engine to go make it happen. Otherwise, we don't want to curtail innovation within the company.
And what is your R&D process? Are you finding that your individual departments are coming to you and saying, can we do this, or are your teams really looking at the landscape and going to each department and saying, this is what we can do for you? I mean, is it a two-way street, or what does that look like? And maybe Kumar, you can start with that.
It's definitely a two-way street. If you look at Intel, there's a manufacturing organization which is responsible for building and scaling and producing more than 1 million chips a day. So there is an infrastructure which manages that. There is a huge IT organization which supports the company. So you would definitely see both inbound and outbound requests on how do we go scale, how do we go make VR happen. But more importantly, what we try to do is we call it our internal dogfooding program. We work with external partners on understanding their business model, on how commercial VR solutions are developed. If we see something compelling and it's applicable to our internal processes, almost always the first thing we do is just bring them on board, okay, and say, all right, at Intel Oregon, let's go deploy it. Let's actually see how this thing works. We actually have market researchers from Intel out in the audience today. I know Susan is out here. She would actually then work in doing the user testing, the research around it, and coming back and saying, here is what the value is. Then, to the point you were making yesterday, how do you convince people internally? We take the user data back, and we go to our CIO and say, okay, here is the line of business savings with this technology, right? And you actually go through that internal selling process, and we create a blueprint, a white paper, which is what actually goes to our broad sales force to say, okay, here's how you sell it into other companies. It's almost like a fairly well-defined process on how we go make this thing happen.
I think for us, although we're expanding quite dramatically, I still have this real sense that we're almost like this sort of family unit as a business, and we're very agile, we can move very quickly, and that's really working to our favor. And to answer your question, it is a two-way thing now. It was very much one way, say 6 months ago, and it was perhaps me saying, come on guys, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. Now they're starting to see the results. They are coming back, and I mentioned, I think to you, Matt, yesterday, that We've had the most unlikely departments, like the quality assurance guys, they're doing virtual audits now. So they are literally checking shut gaps and panel alignment and so on. Before we've even finished the final vehicle, the CAD data, they can walk around the virtual car in the studio and give us an analysis of what's working, what's not working, which for me is a massive tick in the box that they've adopted it. And we're starting to get the service department and manufacturing department, HMI, all of the other teams now are saying, hey, actually, we could perhaps benefit from this. We'll perhaps touch on it in a bit more detail later, but the pipeline is obviously the key to it. And I've heard that a lot all day yesterday and a bit of today. That's the absolute key. For us, it's really heavy data, and the trick is, that's why we've made the switch to go to game software. So we have to make that model light enough and get the fidelity as great as possible so we can spin it around in this natural sort of environment. But once we've created that asset, it's such a valuable asset commodity for all of the departments then in the business.
Absolutely.
That's great. And Matt, I think if you can answer that, but also kind of relative to, you've talked a lot about, content creation. Are you looking at, are there any factions within the BBC who are looking for more productivity tools or internal measures to be able to do their jobs better? I mean, is that part of the impetus of VR?
I think that's a part of our R&D is quite interesting because we do some stuff that's very technical, but we do work with content creators as well. So just to finish off that last point. We have been kind of pushing. We have been getting our content creators in and saying, look, this is what this technology can do. These are the sort of experiences we can enable. Because obviously, as a business, we work with video and audio. This is not, it's not our natural form of content, but it is a place we want to be. As part of R&D's kind of work streams, we're really interested in, I think, both VR and AR. Me specifically, I think AR is going to be very exciting for the organisation in terms of how we create content, because you go to various studios around the BBC and there are walls of monitors, and in my mind AR threatens to disrupt those monitors. I don't see why, if you even have a HoloLens right now, I can put my screens wherever I want them around me, and I can spin up as many of them as I want, and I can maybe personalise my vision mixing environment, or I can personalise my editing pipeline, without being fixed to the hardware that's there. So I think that's an area that we're going to be looking into in the years to come, really trying to get hold of this technology and seeing what it can offer us, what it can offer the production pipeline, where it can either offer efficiencies. If you think of outside broadcast bands, we're shipping vans full of televisions around. If those televisions went away, would that model change in any way? Could that be much more lightweight, much more readily deployable? We have our journalists going out there now and they're broadcasting straight from their mobile phones. Would AR enable kind of production facilities to become much more mobile, maybe without having to cart trucks around? So, there's plenty of opportunity there, I think, to look at where this technology can either, bring time savings or bring cost savings, or enable creators to work in a more creatively free environment. You are limited, even if you're looking through rushes, you're limited by the size of the screens you're looking at. Would it make sense to be surrounded by those rushes? I don't know. It might be information overload, but it might be quite a freeing thing to be able to say, well, I want to put all of those over here, I'm going to put that over there, that bit of interview, I'll put it here, and then looking at that spatially, I think, is quite an interesting thing to do. We're restricted in terms of how we map our kind of content creation and our ideas onto a 2D surface at the moment. And memory doesn't work like that, and understanding doesn't work like that.
Well, I think almost everything you say is spot on from a standpoint that we bucket it under this concept called as workplace transformation. You talked about the production view within like these studios. If you look at it, if you go to the financial services industry and you walk to a trade floor, the number one thing they ask for is screens, right? They have like 4 screens looking at 15 different things. And you're spot on, right? If you look at how we expect the workplace to transform, it's going to be less about the real estate, less about these screens, and it's more about having the ability to do visualization. I think the IDN folks just walked through a visualization concept, which was fantastic, right? We think there are going to be 3 things which will transform the workplace. One is around visualization of data. and how that visualization of data is actually going to enhance productivity, right? And it needs to be measurable productivity improvements. And then the third most important thing within any enterprise environment is collaboration. So if you're able to tie these three things in a cost-effective and in a user-centric manner, I think the workplace transformation will happen over the next 5 years.
I think that's actually very interesting. So we talked a little bit about too, how do you see social VR and the sort of consumer uptake of HMDs and content? How do you see that informing the enterprise side? Because it's giving more credence to the technology as you have these HMDs out there and people are playing games and starting to understand and make that leap between their content and entertainment to maybe productivity. So do you see a path, and does it impact the way that you make your decisions or look at the space?
So our customers love the few that have experienced events or VIP events where we've given them an insight into what we're doing. They absolutely love the technology in it, and it's so on brand for us. And yeah, they can. I've set up things where we have a carbon fiber monocoque with just a seat in it, but when they get inside it and put a headset on, they've got an augmented vehicle around them, and they can suddenly see the differences between it. And for us to turn that into a tool, they could configure their own car, they can change the leather, the stitching, and things like that. They absolutely love it. And the only thing that's holding back at the moment is it's a one-person experience, and you need to be able. You're going to have a queue of people waiting in line to use it, and we need to find a solution as quickly as possible where we can make that available to the masses. If that answers the question.
Yeah.
Well, it's a really simple problem of in terms of educating the rest of the BBC, there's only so many HTC Vive setups or Oculus setups we can run at once. And if you're talking about room scale experiences, then you need the room, right? So in terms of educating the organization, it's quite a challenge because it's not sometimes it's hard to parallelize that process. You've only got so many setups. On that front, I think some of the mixed reality work that the games industry is doing at the moment to actually show you what this experience is like, not from a first-person view, which is usually quite unwatchable, to show you what it looks like for somebody to be in that environment from a third-person point of view. I think that might help us. Okay, it's not necessarily putting everyone in the room through an experience, but you can kind of broadcast the experience better, I think, if you can see the person in the experience having the experience rather than just seeing it through their eyes. So I think there's a couple of quite exciting companies working on how you produce those mixed reality experiences that we're keeping our eyes on.
What it doesn't, sorry, I must just tell you, that's just reminded me, what it doesn't unfortunately stop is a naive marketing guy would say, we've got an event coming up and we want 20 Vives and we want them all in the same room and we want VR, and it's like, this is not going to work. Yeah. It's really not going to work.
Well, and I think there is this interesting line between social VR and collaborative VR, right? And I'm going to take the contrarian view that I hate avatars, right? Especially from a collaborative VR standpoint, it just doesn't work. It doesn't convey the human emotion. There is a huge gap. From a social VR standpoint, it works perfectly fine, right? Because you are in your let your hair down mode, so you're okay trying to do it from a social VR perspective. And that's actually something which has been reiterated by some of our customers when we go talk to them about collaborative VR or collaborative AR. You cannot walk in with an avatar-based view. So there is a gap in technology from where we are today to where we need to be in the next 5 years to get to a non-avatar-based VR solution. But I think we'll get there. I'm not too concerned about it. But that's some of the barriers if you want to say, hey, how do I get collaboration into an enterprise environment? There are still these gaps in making it happen.
Mm-hmm. And so what do you think in terms of VR, AR is one piece of the puzzle. What do you think about the ancillary technologies, haptics, machine learning? How can they best combine for some of the solutions that you're working with? Because there's so much happening and all of these technologies are pushing forward. And are you looking at how to tie them all together for some of your solutions?
Absolutely. Those are some of the core areas where we are leading the innovation on. The way to think about one of the things which we look at between AR and VR is that As soon as you move into the AR mode, you have to understand what the user sees because you're looking through a non-occluded glasses or a transparent view. And as soon as you have to interpret what the user sees, it requires a level of machine learning and computer vision, which still doesn't exist today, right? There is a pretty big gap. We sell into huge data centers. I can put the power of the data center behind it. It still would not be enough to get to the experience a consumer wants to see with an augmented reality glasses today. There's actually a technology gap, which I'm excited about because that's something which we can go solve. I think there's a gap. I think it's 5 years away. If you go ask somebody out in the industry, they could say it's 10 years away. So it's somewhere in that span when you get to that level of augmented reality experience. And that's probably one of the singular reasons why virtual reality is taken over, because that occlusion and not having to interpret the user's view, but able to put in a new reality out there is what helps VR position itself pretty spectacularly right now. I think most of us will agree that having AR is even more exciting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for us, for sure. High fidelity mixed reality headset is what's on the shopping list. That would be absolutely perfect for us. So we can all carry on this conversation. But for me, then, we could have a car here, a virtual car that we could all be pointing at, discussing, and having a really constructive meeting around. So
and then ideally raffle it off at the end for one lucky winner here tonight.
Oh, we were saying it was limited to the 2 panelists out here, so that.
and the haptic as well. To follow up on that, that's Ultra Haptics did a really good presentation this morning, and there's lots of potential with that sort of technology, and we need that extra dimension. Again, back to the human nature of being believable and being comfortable and being in a natural environment. You physically, you want to be able to touch things, so we've got to find a solution for that as soon as possible.
Same relevance for me. If you think about virtualizing the workspace, or having an AR workspace, then do we need to match that with? Do we need to still have the full physical console there? Because if so, then you've still maybe got to have a lot of that truck. It's just that the monitors aren't in it. However, if we can start getting interesting haptic solutions where we can essentially feel the sliders that aren't there, without necessarily looking. I know it's obviously very important for you because you don't want to take your eyes off the road, but it's also very important if you're a vision mixer and you've got 6 monitors in front of you. It's your muscle memory that's going to the button to hit the mix, right? If you are late and you're going, where is it again? I can't feel it. You're trying to hit the air, which you're trying to do with so many kind of VR experiences and AR at the moment. If you've tried HoloLens, I don't find that a really easy thing to do. People get it wrong all the time. You just need to be bang on the controls. So the haptics is really important there, I think.
For a design team as well, just to allow myself to fantasize for a moment, if we could remove all of the switchgear from the dash of the car, how incredible would that be? One of our USPs is visibility for driving, for positioning the car on the road in the right place. If you don't have to have all that clutter, if you've just got these virtual things that you can focus where you're driving, but just touch these things because you know instinctively where they are, it would just be amazing. It would free up the designers so much to create, such an open cockpit environment, and it would be amazing.
I think it's easy for us to just envision, what the future holds for some of these technologies, but from a practical sense, I think we're all charged with that's fantastic, but how do we push a product out the door now that is either relevant to our customer or increases productivity? And increasing productivity doesn't mean flipping a switch and just enabling VR for existing applications. It really requires kind of a ground up rebuild of the thought process behind it. So how are you guys addressing that?
I guess we're at the moment looking at the production process, not necessarily with a VR or an AR hat on, but we have kind of we've been very successful with iPlayer, obviously, and we are, like everyone else, we're a video-on-demand platform, essentially, with a few wrinkles here and there. But we're delivering old forms of content in new ways, and I think we need to look at how we need to transform that kind of pipeline when we're considering the new kinds of content we're going with here. I think that's a real challenge for us. I've forgotten the start of your question. That's
well,
the truth of it.
what's the shortest distance between 2 points? I mean, looking at what's in the pipeline.
Yeah, I know where I was going with this. It's about establishing where the value is, right? So we've got a whole load of creatives who are used to making this stuff in the same way, right? And it's very tempting, especially in an R&D environment, to kind of grab hold of this cool stuff and imagine what we could do with it. But sometimes you approach people who are very used to making things in a certain way, and you've got to be quite sensitive about their production process and their creativity, and look very carefully about, well, if we did apply this approach, is it really going to make their lives better? You know, is it really going to save them time? Is it going to allow them to bring more stuff together, you know, like virtualizing the monitors approach? Or are we just kind of, I don't know, being a little bit too futuristic sometimes?
Sometimes it cooler, not better.
Making it cooler, not better, absolutely. Sometimes it's about really looking at baby steps of kind of tweaking the process and adding a little bit more in terms of time or cost saving in there. Than going in and saying, hey, we've got this amazing new tool that's nothing like what you already do, but we think it's going to be the future. Well, you might be right with some of that, but you can't take them there all in one go.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
And Kumar,
absolutely.
do you have that challenge as well? It's like, you know, what is that kind of next step for you so you're actually getting something out there, solutions out there?
It goes back to Business 101 and Product Design 101, right? Where it has to be extremely focused on solving a very specific solution, right? VR can manifest itself in two ways today. It enhances existing workflow. So if you take a look at what we're doing in the construction or engineering phase, you are working in 3D space even before VR existed in its current form. What VR does is enhance that usage, and it makes it more real. It makes it more productive to go make that happen. That is one class of usage, and those have a very specific metric on how do you measure value towards that. But then there is a second class of usage for VR where it's usages which don't exist today. I think the perfect examples are all the one which the professors from Stanford talked about, where it's surgical training or medical use cases, or I think education is just ripe for disruption with VR. And in those cases, it's about focusing on very specific usages which address real problem, okay? And being almost paranoid about how specific you are on those solutions is what is going to make happen. So having a horizontal platform where we are saying, hey, I can go build VR on it is great, but it's actually not something you can sell in. What you can actually sell in and go make those 2 points meet is actually walking in with a very prescribed solution to say, okay, this is the problem I'm solving for you in education, and this is how much money it's going to save you, or this is what you can do today which you weren't able to do yesterday. That kind of a precise answer is what's required.
Mm-hmm. So actually, so if you take the leap from kind of education to training, I mean, sim and training's been, you know, around for a long time, and you know, the military and aviation have been using sim and training. Are you using any kind of training? Are you looking at any kind of training for either on the tech side or internal teams? Is that helpful to you? Is that something that you guys are looking at in your businesses?
I don't know if it's exactly what you're getting at, but certainly in terms of all of our dealers will ultimately have simulators in them where you can go in and you can drive a virtual car, so you can start to funnel down the choice of what car you want before you've even got near a physical car. So in terms of training, you'll be able to see the racing line, you'll have a headset on, you'll be able to know when to brake. It will give you all of that sort of additional information. Mm-hmm. And it's something similar to that we'll have a similar tool that the designers will be using as well, you know, while they're putting the car together. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but we definitely will have that sort of technology in all the dealerships, and the dealers are so excited about that, to be able to use that tech.
That's great. Good. So I guess this is the dream question, you know, with taking all the, you know, technical, you know, objects aside and looking at where you think this technology is going. If you could build it today, what would be sort of your dream solution? And who wants to start with that?
I can take a stab at it. I paid a boatload of money to have LASIK to remove glasses, and then now people are saying go wear glasses again, right? That by itself is a big problem. But definitely the HMD or the head-mounted display has to be a lot more simpler, a lot more lighter. I think most of the folks in this room would agree with me that you can't wear that thing more than 30 minutes today. There's a huge inflection point which is going to happen where it is going to be as simple as your normal sunglasses you wear. Maybe, hopefully, by the turn of the decade, if not a little bit after that. That's step one. But step two is if you want to get to the breadth of adoption within enterprise, you need to be able to get to the high-res displays. The screen door effect, which you have in current HMDs, preclude productivity applications. You can't really go do Word or Excel in an HMD today. You really can't. So you really want to get to that level of resolution and clarity to go make enterprise usages happen.
So I mean, we're working on a pipeline at the moment. We'll have that in place first quarter next year, which is a massive step forward, and that could begin to lead into my fantasy, which was the Hollow Studio. That would be perfect. You know, you'd go in and you'd have say a rolling chassis, radiators, engine, gearbox, and so on. That's all the hard points. But you could actually start to sketch in the virtual world over the top of it. You create a mesh. You would almost have a virtual clay model, if you like, and then you configure it, and then you sit inside it, and then you choose your circuit or where you're going, and you drive off in it. And it's kind of that, you know, you'd be able to modify it and push and pull. You do everything we do in the studio physically, but you'd do it virtually. And I can kind of...
I want that too.
I might be deluded, but I can kind of see light at the end of the tunnel, but I don't know whether that's 5 years, 10 years, however many years it is, but that's the goal.
So for me, it's essentially bringing, you know, what the BBC is good at is kind of content, and we have a lot of presenters and talent, and I've been thinking for a while, well, how can we bring these things together? How can we get real people in VR environments as they are? You know, we don't want to put David Attenborough in a mocap suit and build a David Attenborough model so you can have a VR experience with David Attenborough. So essentially, it's about reality capture for us. You know, what I would really like to see, and we're starting to get some interesting stuff from Microsoft on this front, is to be able to walk one of our personalities into a capture environment and essentially broadcast them live into a video games engine, and then share a multiplayer video games engine, essentially. Then you can actually share the space with this personality, with David Attenborough or whatever. And obviously, because it's a virtual space, it could be anything. You know, it might not be David Attenborough in the jungle. It might be Professor Brian Cox on Mars, right? Mm-hmm. And because it's not because it's a virtual environment, we can have as many audience members almost on top of each other at once if they haven't got physical representations. But that, for me, you know, the chance to kind of get our personalities out there, literally in front of the audience, maybe with even the audience having a back channel so they can interact in some way. Obviously, that's a bit of a challenge when you might have 1 million viewers and only one Professor Brian Cox. But you know, that for me would be really, really exciting.
That's great. That's great. I think we have some time for a few questions.
Mike?
Hi, Tom Fuller with YouGov. My question is for Mr. Brooks, and it seems to me that kind of a natural playing field for VR for the BBC would be in pre-production, lighting, set design, sound, continuity, tracking shots. Are you working in that space at all?
I'm not aware of R&D working in that space, but I've thought the same thing myself. In terms of set pre-visualization, I think the challenge there, again, is one of kind of educating people. That, you know, we do a lot of things in very, very traditional ways, and it's about getting out there and saying, well, look, maybe it would be easier for you to kind of try a whole load of set configurations out in a virtual space than build them for real. But I suppose, you know, in terms of set design, we've got the expertise to put these things together physically, and it's a different skill set, and it's different roles that we need to bring in. You know, you need to draw from the digital domain, from the kind of game environment creators, really, to pull that stuff together. So I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think there's definitely opportunities there for, again, saving time, saving money, going through more permutations of the set, doing it all virtually until you actually land on the right thing that you're happy with. And with the lighting design, you know, we can perfectly well reproduce pretty much any real-world lighting in virtual spaces, checking out all the lights and shadows, checking out where they will fall and whether you actually need to put another light in here or over there. I think there's some great possibilities there, but we're not there yet.
Question in the back, please stand.
Yeah. Hi, Dylan Fox from Major League Baseball Advanced Media. A challenge that I find large corporations, especially multinational ones, often face is collaborating with people that are perhaps hundreds of miles away. So my question is, what kind of features in a virtual collaborative space would you want to see that would make be considerably more effective than video calls or other types of collaboration tools?
I think we talked about this just before we came on.
Yeah.
For me, in an ideal world, yeah, you could have people calling in from all over the world, and say back to my studio, we could be looking around a virtual car. We'd have avatars of each of us, and we would be discussing what we liked, what we didn't like. We'd make notes, we'd point at things, we would sketch areas that would change this, I don't like that, this looks great. And then you could capture all of that information, and it's kind of virtual minutes, if you like. Then I get on my airplane and fly home, and I can pull down the tray, and I can scale it down, and I can see a scale model there, and I can click on what you've said and what these guys have said, pull out the notes, and that'd be a really useful tool.
Yeah, I think one of the things to think about it is we call it destination usages, so we don't expect virtual reality to be applicable everywhere within an enterprise on day one. But the type of use cases which I think will actually solve that is having virtual reality conference rooms, like dedicated conference rooms focused on virtual reality and building solutions around that, which solves it. Because I think the same way we have telepresence rooms today, there will be a future where you'll move into virtual reality rooms, which hopefully avoid avatars, but provide the same level of quality of service like what telepresence does today.
We have a question back here.
Yeah, I have a quick question for Matthew. I'm picturing a VR environment with replacing a temperamental, possibly highly overpaid broadcaster, and then capturing that with a regular television broadcast, but you don't have to pamper this person or whatever, replace the broadcaster. Can you do stuff like that? Would there be any interest?
What, so kind of a digital simulacrum of a presenter that's like a well-behaved Jeremy Clarkson or something?
It's a digital diva, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that, in many ways. We were talking earlier about, obviously there's been instances in Hollywood where someone has unfortunately died during film production, and they have had to have a digital version of them finish things. Are we going to get to a situation where prominent actors and talents could actually sell digital versions of themselves? I don't know if it's anything we would do, because
But it's going to happen.
word. I think it's going to happen.
It is happening, and
It seems
yeah.
like low-hanging fruit because it's one face in front of a logo giving you the news.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting. There's been things like Automotive in the past with virtual news presenting, and it's about the trustworthiness, though, for the BBC. If we are putting a virtual newsreader up there, what does that do to your trust?
Yeah, does the person read fake news? That's the question.
Could you not choose your own favourite one, though? I could customise mine, you could customise yours.
Yeah, I guess you could
Yeah,
do. Yeah,
absolutely.
We have time for one more question.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you to my wonderful panel here. I hope this was educational and informative.
Okay, thank you. So we're taking a break right now. Please go out to the hall and be able to grab some food. We'll be starting up again at 2:30 sharp.